This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and you can see the title right on your screen. Cheating fiancé gets demoted to third string backup status. Oh my, let's get into this story and see what it's all about. And the original poster starts out and she says, "Before telling my story, I'll confess right up front that I am 100% to blame for my current predicament. I was the one who cheated on my boyfriend for no other reason than being selfish. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to call him Harry and call myself Katie. I chose those names as they are my favorite performers. Now, she's probably referring to, I'm thinking, Harry Styles and Katy Perry, although there could be other Harry and Katies out there, I'm sure. We're both 26 and have officially been a couple for 3 years. We had a dreamlike love story, even though our personalities are vastly different. Harry is more right of center, conservative actually, and I'm definitely more left-leaning on everything. Now, I put up a big caution sign here, and that's because in today's modern society, I don't know if people at the opposite ends of the spectrum can get along. I mean, before, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I probably would say, yeah, it's possible, even though they're vastly different. But today, I just don't see it. He likes to hunt, play cards, and shoot targets, while I like supporting social causes through my social media accounts and volunteering. I'll also confess that bargain clothes shopping is my secret vice. We met at a drag race of all places. He was there with a bunch of his friends, and I was there for an employee outing. We were in line across from each other at the concession stand. I think he sensed I was bored and struck up a conversation with me. Since the line was super long, we had a lot of time to talk. His line moved quicker than mine, so he got up to the window first. When he did, he looked back and asked what I wanted. I told him a Diet Coke, and he ordered it for me. I tried to pay him, but he refused and said it was his treat. I thanked him and told him that was sweet. Harry then said, "You can return the favor by giving me your phone number." I was hoping he'd ask for it, so I gave it to him right away, and he said he'd call me sometime. When he got back to his seat, he texted me and I texted him back. We texted several additional times throughout the races. 4 days later, we went on our first date and fell in love soon after. In our case, it was a situation where opposites were definitely attracted and the attraction was intense. We became inseparable, save for the times when he and his friends went on their monthly boys' weekends. Now, 2 things I wanted to point out here. First, I put up that caution sign because she's saying they became inseparable. You've got to really be cautious about building your whole life around someone and making them the center of your world. Also, you can see already that she doesn't like him hanging out with his friends, especially going off on these boys' weekends, as she calls it. They've been doing this for the past 5 years and never miss a month. They travel all over the place to hunt and fish and also like going to Las Vegas to play cards and bet on sports. He told me about these trips shortly after we met, and I didn't have a problem with it at the time. To be honest though, my hope was he would cut back or stop going on these trips once we became serious, but he didn't. I put up that caution sign because you can see this is a major issue for her with him going away on these trips and hanging out so much with his friends. He'd always tell me about his travel plans well in advance, so I could make plans myself for the time when he was away. Normally on those weekends I'd either go visit my parents, my sister, or one of my friends. Harry normally would return early Sunday evening and would make it a point to come over and stay the night at my apartment, and he always brought me a little gift every time. Those Sunday evenings when he returned from one of his trips were the most passionate and loving times we ever spent together. Back in September, we celebrated our 3-year anniversary. While out to dinner, we had a discussion where we admitted to each other that we were basically unofficially engaged since we had been completely committed and monogamous since we met. It was then we made a decision to move in together by the end of the year. We thought this would be a good test to see if we were truly compatible living under the same roof. His lease was up at the end of October and mine at the end of the year. We had just signed a lease on a new two-bedroom apartment in mid-October, and he moved in shortly after, just before his lease expired. The weekend Harry moved was hectic and crazy. All of his friends helped him move his furniture and other stuff, while I, along with two of his friends' girlfriends, put stuff away. During the entire weekend, Harry spent most of his time with his friends while I spent time with the ladies who I barely knew. Though we all did go out to dinner Saturday night and to brunch on Sunday. During the next week, I spent Monday through Wednesday with Harry at our new place, getting everything set up like we wanted and slowly moving some of my stuff in. On Thursday, Harry and his friends had a hunting trip planned out of state. I tried to convince him not to go so that we could continue setting up the apartment, but he insisted, as this was their biggest hunting trip of the year. This really upset me, but I didn't show it. He and his friends left on Thursday morning and planned to return on Monday evening. Keep that in mind, folks. That weekend, my parents, sister, and all my close friends already had plans, so I resigned myself to the fact that I would be spending the next 4 days and nights alone until Harry returned. I planned to continue working on the apartment and watching Netflix all by myself. Now here's where I really messed up. There's a guy, Jason, she says, that works in the same building where I work, that had been casually hitting on me for the past 6 months. Well, if this guy has been hitting on you for 6 months, that's not casually hitting on you. He is overtly hitting on you. I'd run into him down at the little cafeteria in the lobby of our building. He was never obnoxious or anything, but you know how you can tell if a guy wants you. I made it known to him that I had a boyfriend, and he never pushed any further. Well, on that Thursday, I ran into him in the lobby as I was going back up to my office. We chatted for a bit, and he told me that his boss just awarded him front row tickets to see one of my favorite artists. According to him, the tickets were initially for one of their customers, but they had to back out of going at the last minute, so his boss awarded him the tickets because of his job performance. I couldn't believe it. Those tickets originally cost $550, and since the concert was totally sold out, they were going for as high as $3,500 online. I told Jason the artist was one of my favorites, and he asked me to go with him. I hesitated for a moment and then told him I can't, as I was in a relationship. We talked a while longer about the artist and then parted ways to go back to our offices. That night, as I sat alone in our new apartment, I was missing Harry while at the same time thinking about that concert and how much I wanted to go. The next morning at work, I walked down to the cafeteria to get a coffee prior to starting the day and ran into Jason. Here's where I made the big mistake. He told me he still had the extra ticket and asked if I had changed my mind. Instead of saying no like I should have, I instead asked him if I could meet him there, as I couldn't go as his date as I was in a relationship. He said yes, of course. He then told me to wait there in the lobby while he went up to his desk to retrieve the ticket and bring it back to me. He returned a few minutes later, handed me the ticket, and said he'd see me when I got there. On my lunch break, I called Harry to let him know I was going to the concert. I told him another company in our building got tickets and offered them up to our company, and I got one. I said I would be attending along with other coworkers from my company. So she's completely lying to her boyfriend or fiancé, whatever you want to call him. Throughout the year, I attended a number of events for work, so Harry didn't question me about it. He just told me to have fun and to text him when I get to the arena and when I get home. I felt really bad not being totally forthcoming with him, but I knew if I told him who gave me the tickets and who I'd be sitting with, he'd never accept it, even though my only interest was in the tickets and not the guy. Are you sure? As I drove to the venue, I talked to Harry the entire way and sent him several selfies of me at the concert, and the poor guy is off on this hunting trip somewhere, and he's saying, oh look, my girlfriend's out with their coworkers, and she's having fun. Meanwhile, she's got her date sitting right beside her. I arrived at my seat just before the concert started, leaving a little time for small talk with Jason. It felt awkward being there with him, but I convinced myself it was okay since I was just attending the concert. I was mesmerized and dancing during the entire show and hardly spoke to Jason at all during the performance. He wasn't really into the artist, while I'm definitely a raving fan. It was probably the best concert I ever attended, but unfortunately I'll only remember the event as being one of the worst decisions of my life. After the concert, Jason asked if I wanted to grab a quick drink with him. I told him I couldn't. I thanked him for giving me the ticket, and we walked out of the arena together. When we got outside, he insisted on walking me to my car. Along the way, he asked what my plans were for the weekend. I told him I didn't have any plans and was probably just going to do housework. I asked what he was going to do, and he said he was going to work out both days and then take it easy the rest of the time. He said that after he works out in the morning, he normally stops at a coffee shop to catch up on his email from the week. It just so happens to be the same coffee shop I go to, but I never saw him there before. Is that really a coffee shop that you go to, or is now that going to be a coffee shop you go to? I told him this, and he told me to stop by and say hello if I was in the area tomorrow morning. We got to my car, and again I thanked him so much for giving me the ticket and told him how much I enjoyed the concert. It was another awkward moment. There was no kiss, no hug, and not even a handshake. I felt kind of bad as I gave him nothing in return, and he had been such a gentleman. As soon as I started driving, I called Harry and told him what a great time I had. Because of the bottleneck getting out of the parking lot, it took me nearly an hour to drive home. Harry and I continued talking the entire time. The next morning, I got up and started working around the apartment, getting things organized and put away. As I was doing so, I started thinking about Jason and how nice he was to me and how I didn't hardly speak to him at all last night, and I started feeling guilty. Around 10 a.m., I decided to go to the coffee shop and see if he was there. My plan was just to drop by to quickly thank him again. I arrived and saw him sitting at a table outside. I went over and greeted him and then went inside to get a coffee and bought him another grande size latte. I went back out and sat down and we started chatting. I only planned to stay there for 5 to 10 minutes, just long enough to thank him again for last night. We started talking and quickly found out we had so many common interests. Unlike Harry, Jason's values were almost totally aligned with mine. We ended up sitting there talking for almost 2 hours, after which we walked next door to grab lunch and continued talking there for another 2 hours. I know it was wrong, but I have to admit I was taken in by him and how much we had in common. Now listen to this. She says he's definitely a guy I would have dated if I wasn't already in a relationship. I should have left things there, but I didn't. Instead, I invited him out to dinner that night so we could continue our discussions. We met at the restaurant at 7, and again we talked throughout the entire meal. We were talking just as friends, but I felt a strong chemistry with him that I just couldn't resist. After we left the restaurant, I didn't want our discussions to end, so I asked if he'd like to continue talking. Well, of course, he's going to say yes. He said sure. Where do you want to go? I told him why don't we just go to my place, as we already spent too much money today eating out. While I knew this was a risk, I didn't plan for things to go the way they did. Now come on, you're bringing a guy back to your apartment and you didn't expect things to go the way they did? We're not stupid. We know what you were up to and what you planned on happening. As soon as we arrived at my apartment, we talked for about 10 minutes and then started making out. I don't believe you even talked for 10 minutes. I bet as soon as that door opened, you guys were all over each other. I told him about my situation, but he said he didn't care. Unfortunately, neither did I at that point, and we ended up having intimate relations for the rest of the night until we eventually fell asleep. So man, she forgot about Harry real quick, didn't she? In my mind, I convinced myself this would be a one-time thing and nothing more. After all, Harry was away doing God knows what, so see, she's already trying to justify it, saying, well, I don't know what Harry's doing when he goes on these trips. He could be hooking up with other girls. You see what she's doing here? Now listen to this, listen to this. The next thing I remember was being waken out of a deep sleep by Harry's voice saying, "Good morning, Katie." Being groggy, I didn't immediately remember what happened the previous night and was at first glad to hear Harry's voice. When I opened my eyes, I saw Harry standing in the doorway, and I asked him why he was home so early. He shook his head and said I hope it was worth it and turned around and walked away. It was then I realized Jason was still lying in bed beside me. I shook him to wake him up, and then I sprang out of the bed wrapped in a sheet and started running out of the room to stop Harry and to explain what happened. As I was doing so, my feet and hands got tangled up in the sheet and I fell face first onto the floor. When I got up, I realized that I had bitten right through my lip. Jason ran over to me and lifted me up and took me into the bathroom, and we applied towels with direct pressure to stop the bleeding. Once things were stabilized, I told him to leave. He insisted on staying, but I told him to please leave and that yesterday and last night was all a big mistake. He wouldn't leave, so I started yelling at him, telling him he ruined everything and to just get out. So you see how she's passing blame now on this Jason. She's telling him you ruined my life. No, Katie, you're the one who went out to coffee with him, then to lunch with him, then to dinner with him, and you're the one that brought him home to your apartment. So this is 100% on you, because he wasn't in a relationship with your boyfriend. You were. He finally ended up leaving after I kept shouting at him. After he did, I sat on the edge of the tub applying pressure to my lip and crying. When I looked in the mirror, I could tell it was a deep cut and I really should have stitches. So I went to the urgent care that's close to my apartment. There I ended up getting 6 stitches. They also gave me a painkiller and put me on a corticosteroid to reduce the swelling. When I got back to my apartment, my face was aching and I was mentally distraught. I tried reaching Harry to apologize and to explain everything, but he didn't answer. I spent the rest of the day at my apartment crying and beating myself up for what I'd done. All the while, I kept trying to contact Harry, but he just ignored my attempts. I really needed to talk to someone, and I couldn't tell my family or friends as I was too embarrassed. So I ended up calling Jason to help me make sense of things. So she's telling us all in this story how, oh, this Jason ruined her life and she's only friends with him and it was a big mistake. But yet now she's calling him to talk through things with him. Unbelievable. I first apologized for putting him in that situation. I then explained that what I did yesterday was wrong and took full responsibility for my actions. I explained to him that I was in love with Harry and wanted to marry him someday. If I was this Jason, I would say, really, come on. I told Jason I'd like to keep our relationship to being just friends. Well, you've already gone way past friends because we shared so much in common. But we could never be alone again because I was in love with Harry. Jason tried convincing me to break off my relationship with Harry as he wanted us to be together, but I told him no. I said what I did was wrong and I know who I am and I was meant to be Harry's partner. Jason then asked me to consider at least keeping our intimate relationship going as I tried working through things with Harry. So Jason was saying, man, I really like what we did there last night. Why don't we keep this going? And then you could see if you work things out with Harry, and if you do, you can go be with Harry, but in the meantime, you and I could keep hooking up. I told him no. I would never do that to Harry. I explained that our relationship could only consist of cordial conversations whenever we casually bumped into each other, and nothing more. That's how I left things with Jason. I ended up taking Monday and Tuesday off to recuperate from my accident and to try making contact with Harry, but he's totally shut me out. Good for you, Harry. The silent treatment is always the best way to go. He's not answering my calls or texts, and I can't blame him. I feel so bad. All I want to do is apologize to him and ask for another chance. I know I'd never hurt him again, and I could prove it if he just let me try. Let me know if you think I should keep trying or if I should just give up and try to move on. The problem is I don't think I can make it without Harry at my side. He's been my rock and my light, and I can't see myself existing in the world without him. So that's the end of her original post, and now we're going to take a look at a few responses she got back from the community. But before we do, I want to encourage you, if you've liked what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button right now. That will help get this video seen by people all over the planet. Now, let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one's from a woman. She says, if you are truly sincere about your love for Harry, then I would throw myself at his feet and tell him you will do anything to prove it. At this point, you've totally blown up what you had, so it will take extreme measures to get back to where you were. I cheated on my first boyfriend in college and quickly regretted it. She says he took me back and I did everything, I mean everything, for him, and I thought things were going well, but he suddenly dumped me after 4 months and started dating another woman who he eventually ended up marrying. I realize now that he was the love of my life, and I wish I had taken even more drastic measures to keep him. Now listen to this last part she says. She says, I'll never forget him and still think about him often, even though that all happened years ago and I've since married and have a great husband and family. So even though this woman now is married and this is years ago this all happened and she's got kids and everything, she's still thinking about that guy. So that poor guy that married her was obviously her second choice or her third choice or her fourth choice, who knows? And he's probably thinking, oh, I've got a wonderful wife and family. Meanwhile, this wife is still dreaming about a guy that she did dirty 20 years ago or something. Unbelievable. Next, we have a response from a guy. He says, people on here are not as stupid and gullible as you think. We can see right through your games and manipulation. It's clear you are attracted to this Jason guy, and your plan was to juggle a relationship with him and Harry at the same time, then eventually select the one you want to be with. I've seen women do this before, and I'm ashamed to say I've fallen for it, but never again. Harry would be a fool to take you back, he says. And next we have another response from a woman. She says, regardless of what you are telling us, it's clear from your story you do not love or even desire Harry. The guy who rings your bell is Jason. You should let Harry go to find someone who will be compatible with him, and you should pursue a relationship with Jason. Where I'm afraid you may have hurt your chances with Jason is that you cheated on Harry with him. I know this may seem counterintuitive, but the fact you so quickly had us with him while in a 3-year relationship with Harry conveys to Jason that you are someone who is probably not reliable. Probably not reliable? I would say definitely not reliable. In the back of his mind, I'm sure he's now thinking, if she did this to him, she'll likely do it to me someday. You should address this with him right up front, she says. And then finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, you're the reason so many men are choosing not to marry these days. So let me get this straight. You're in a 3-year relationship with a guy and talking about spending the rest of your life with him, and then some guy comes and offers you concert tickets, and you end up sleeping with him the very next night. Please tell me your post was all work of fiction. If not, you've got some serious problems to work on, sister. So those were some of the responses she got, and now we're going to take a look at some of the updates that she's given. The first one came 17 days later. She says, I apologize for not giving an update sooner, but as you know, I've had a lot going on in my personal life. Before I start, I want to address something that has come up in a number of the comments I received. I do not love Jason and have no interest in getting into a relationship with him. While we do have a lot in common and share many of the same interests, he could never mean anything to me as long as Harry exists in the world. Now, if I never met and fell in love with Harry, that might be a different story. What I'm saying here is Harry is my soulmate, and as long as he's alive, while I'm alive, he will always be my number one guy. I'll now pick up on things where I last left off. As I said in my original post, I took Monday and Tuesday of that week off to recuperate from my fall and try to get in touch with Harry. Harry blocked my number and changed his status to single on Facebook. I knew when people would see this, they would start asking questions, so I had to get out in front of it. I called my mom and told her about my fall and the stitches. She was worried about me and wanted to come down to spend a few days with me. I told her that wasn't necessary since I was feeling better and the swelling had gone down. She asked if Harry went with me to the urgent care, and I told her no. I then explained that her and I were going through a rough patch and hadn't spoken for a few days. I think she has a typo there. I think she meant to say he and I were going through a rough patch and hadn't spoken for a few days. Mom then started asking me 1,000 questions about what was going on. I told her we were working through things and everything would be okay. She and my dad love Harry and have been encouraging us to get married and give them another grandchild. Mom and I talked a bit longer and I thought that was that, but then things took a turn for the worse that evening. Mom called me and started yelling at me, asking why I didn't tell her I cheated on Harry. I asked what she was talking about, and she told me that she called Harry and he told her that he and I were no longer together. She kept asking him why, and he told her to ask me. According to her, she told him that she wasn't going to hang up until he told her the truth. So instead of Harry just maintaining his silence, he instead sent Mom a picture he took of Jason and I in bed together. I didn't know he took the picture and was horrified. The picture is of Jason laying on his back and me laying across his chest with my head just below his chin and my bare back exposed. Like I said, I was horrified and had to tell Mom the truth about why we broke up. Mom spent the next hour yelling at me at the top of her lungs. I couldn't get her to stop and finally had to hang up on her. She called back a couple hours later and we talked through things. Cheating is a real hot button issue for Mom, as she raised me and my 3 siblings to be faithful and trustworthy people and to never cheat. The reason this was such a hot button issue for Mom is that she cheated on Daddy 1 year after they were married with an ex-boyfriend. At the time, my parents were struggling financially, and she admits it was a weak moment for her and the biggest mistake of her life. So, I guess you could say the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. Daddy caught them in the act and made her move out and filed for an annulment. Mom kept begging Dad to give her a second chance, but he kept moving forward with the divorce. Then, like a miracle, a week before the hearing date, Daddy decided to give Mom another chance. That was 33 years ago, and they've since gone on to have a fairy tale marriage with 4 kids and 7 grandchildren. When each of us kids reached an age where we were old enough to understand, Mom sat us down and explained what she did. Well, I have to give the mother credit for doing that. Now, if the mom actually did that and really sat them down and explained she cheated on their father years ago and that it was wrong and to never do that, I give her a lot of credit for doing so. She also pointed out the guy she cheated with to us so that we could see what a big mistake she made. The guy is a complete loser who doesn't work and lives in public housing. He also weighs about 400 pounds now and drives around town on one of those scooters. Ever since she and Daddy reconciled, she has treated him like a king, and he deserves it. He's been a wonderful dad to us, and our mom has been a wonderful mom. None of us can believe what she did, and that's why cheating is such a sensitive subject for her. Now here's where it gets worse. Mom told me I had to tell my dad what I did. I told her I didn't want to, as I knew it would break his heart and make him think less of me. She said I had to and that I needed to travel back home to tell him in person. So that weekend I drove back home to tell Daddy. When he saw me, Dad was concerned about the visible cut on my lip and started asking how I got it, and I told him I just fell down in the bedroom. After explaining that, I told Dad what I did, and he started crying. Then Mom started crying and I started crying. Dad excused himself from the room while Mom and I sat there crying our eyes out. When Dad returned, he asked me about Harry, and I told him Harry broke up with me, but I was trying to get him back. I then said I hope he is as forgiving and loving as you are, Dad. What Dad said next shocked me and really hurt Mom. Dad said he would advise Harry not to give me a second chance because the whole process is just too taxing mentally. He said the best thing for us is to go our separate ways and find someone new to make a fresh start. Mom then asked Dad if he was sorry he gave her a second chance. He said, "No, you gave me 4 beautiful children." She then said, "If I didn't give you children, would you still say the same?" And he said, "Probably not." Hearing this crushed Mom, and she cried for the rest of the day. Later that night, after we ate dinner, Dad explained himself. He told Mom he loves her and wouldn't trade her for anything now, but said that the first 5 or 6 years after she cheated on him were mentally stressful and something that he wouldn't wish on his worst enemy. Mom cried and they talked for a long time at the table. Thankfully, by the end of the conversation, they kissed and hugged, and everything is back to normal for them. Driving home, I felt so terrible for not only cheating on Harry, but for ripping open an old scar from my parents that I thought had totally healed years ago. I promise you, I have learned a lesson and will never be unfaithful again. For now, I'm going to focus on getting Harry back and proving to him that I can be the loving and trustworthy partner I was before. Well, let me tell you something, Katie, you're never going to be able to prove that, even if he does take you back, and just like your dad took back your mom, it's never going to be 100% of what it was before. You just have to face that. Now she comes back with her final update, so we can see what happened, and the final update came 3.5 months later. She says, "I've come back to close the book on this post and to move on to the next phase of my life. After trying unsuccessfully for 3 months to get Harry to talk to me, I've finally given up. I know what I did to him was inexcusable, and we will both be scarred by my actions for the rest of our lives, but the least he could have done was given me closure." Well, I think you gave yourself closure when you jumped in the sack with this Jason. You gave the relationship closure, so he doesn't owe you anything more than that. I'm mentally defeated and have been going to counseling for the past 2 months. The counselor told me she believes I am truly sorry and remorseful for my actions, and that I will likely never do again what I did to Harry. She also said that no matter how sincere you are, oftentimes the betrayed partner never sees it in their heart to give the cheating partner closure. This can cause severe mental distress to the cheating partner, which can lead them to do terrible things. I told her I can totally relate to that, because that's how I felt since the day Harry caught me cheating. Not that I would ever consider harming myself, but I just don't have motivation to move forward with anything, and some days I don't want to get out of bed. The past few weeks for me have been very difficult as I found out Harry has started dating again. In fact, I've seen him with two different women going in and out of his new apartment. Now listen to what she says next. Yes, I will admit that I've been stalking him, but not in an evil way. When I'm feeling really bad, I drive over to his place and sit in the parking lot watching his door from a distance, hoping I can catch a glance of him. Folks, don't do what she's doing. Never stalk an ex. I mean, that is totally unhealthy and downright psychotic. She says last Saturday I ran into one of Harry's friend's girlfriends at the farmer's market. I asked if she had a few minutes to talk, and we grabbed some apple cider and sat at one of the picnic tables to talk. I, of course, asked her a million questions about Harry. She knew what happened between us, as Harry told all his friends, and they, of course, told their girlfriends. She was very guarded in her responses to me, but she did share one thing that pretty much decided things for me. She said that Harry told his friends that he is looking for a girl to marry, and in the meantime, he would be dating a bunch of second-string women for physical pleasure. The two women he's seeing now are both divorced and in their mid-30s, so he's dating some cougars there. He's made it clear to them that they will never be more than FWB-type lovers, and they are apparently okay with it. I then asked her if, based on what she knows, if there was a chance he would ever take me back. She just looked at me with a sense of pity on her face and kind of grimaced. I asked her to level with me and just tell me. She said based on what she knows, there's no way. I then asked what she knows, and she said Harry told his friends that if he ever gets really desperate and none of his second stringers are available, he might consider calling me for a quick fix, but nothing more. I asked her if he said those words, and she said that's what her boyfriend told her. After hearing this, I thanked her and we left. I cried for the rest of the day, realizing my relationship with Harry was broken beyond repair. It was time to move on. My counselor has been working to help me get past this, but it's really hard. Thanks to everyone who read my posts, and especially to those of you who encouraged me throughout this process. So that's the end of her story. Now for this Harry, I think he handled the situation appropriately. You know, he came home, he caught her in bed with another guy. Instead of acting crazy and getting physical with the guy and potentially getting himself in a bunch of trouble, he just tells her, okay, I hope it was worth it, turns around and heads out the door, and then completely cuts contact with her. That, of course, drives her crazy. It's eating away at her still, but you know what, that's her fault. She needs to pick up the pieces now and move forward, and I'm sure this Harry is going to be just fine. There's going to be plenty of women out there for him. He's in his mid-20s. He's apparently got a job. He's working. He's doing well for himself. It sounds like he'll have no problems getting someone else, and for her, she's in her mid-20s, and I'm sure she's an attractive girl. She'll have no problems getting someone else, but what she needs to do, she needs to be truthful with him right up front and say the last relationship I was in lasted for 3 years and we broke up because I cheated on him. Now, will she tell her next beau that? Probably not, but that's what she should do. Now, let's take a look at what I think are the morals of the story. First of all, in today's world, people on opposite sides of the social and political spectrum are nearly incompatible. Like I said previously, I would have told you, yeah, it could work out. It'll be a little awkward, but it could still work out. In today's world, I just don't think it will work. Next, cheating is never just a physical thing with women. Don't believe what they say. There are always emotions involved. Next, and I said this on the last story, mental stress will eventually impact your physical health. Look at this girl's dad. He said for 5 or 6 years after he took his wife back after she cheated on him, he was mentally stressed. Why do you want to live your life like that? You know life is too short. Don't stay with someone who betrayed you. Next, the betrayed partner never fully recovers from infidelity. Again, using her dad as an example, 33 years later, you can still see that still eats away at that guy whenever he thinks about it, and that's the way it is when people take someone back who's cheated on them. That's always going to be in the back of their mind. Next, a strong man will never accept any form of cheating. It doesn't matter if it was 1 time, 10 times, 100 times. It doesn't matter if she's emotionally connected to him or not, which I just said that's all bunk because there's always emotions involved. A strong man will never accept any form of cheating, and then finally, as I always say, after cheating occurs, go your separate ways. Focus on your mental, physical, and financial health and move on with your life. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think this guy handled the situation? Would you have handled it like he did, or would you have done something completely different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also be sure to hit that like button. Share this video with your friends and subscribe to this channel and I will. You know how people say life can get a bit monotonous? Well, let me tell you, they're not kidding. It's like you wake up one day and bam, you're 33, with a decade of marriage under your belt and a couple of kids who are your world. But then, there's this gnawing feeling, like a tiny hole in your favorite sweater that keeps getting bigger. That's where my story starts. I'm not your typical protagonist with a dramatic life story. I'm just me, a regular woman with a regular job in a regular town. I work 9 to 5, pick up groceries, make dinner, help with homework. You get the drill. My husband? He's a good man, really. Works his butt off, but that's the problem. He's always working, especially in the evenings. Our schedules are like two ships passing in the night. We're together, but not really together, you know? The loneliness crept up on me slowly. It wasn't just missing my husband, it was missing something. Connection. Excitement, heck, even just adult conversation that wasn't about bills or what's for dinner. So, what do you do when you're lonely? Some people might read a book or binge watch shows. Me. I did something I never thought I'd do. I signed up for a dating site. Yeah, one of those sites, but for people like me, married and not looking to change that, just looking. I can almost hear you judging, but hold on. It wasn't like I dove into this head first. It was more like dipping a toe in the water. Curiosity, you know? I just wanted to see what was out there, what I was missing. And for a while, it was innocent. Just browsing profiles, seeing other people in the same boat. It was comforting in a way. But then he messaged me. Let's call him Mr. X. He was 27, married too, and just like me, he wasn't looking to upend his life. He just wanted more. Our chats were casual at first. I'd log on after the kids were in bed, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. Movies, music, our dreams, our frustrations. It was easy, you know? Like talking to an old friend. Then we exchanged numbers. Texting turned into calls, and before I knew it, I was waiting for his messages, his calls. It was like a drug. I'd feel this rush every time my phone buzzed. We'd talk for hours, late into the night, when the house was quiet and I felt more alone than ever. We had this connection. It was undeniable. We got each other in a way that felt both exciting and terrifying. The more we talked, the more I wanted to meet him. It was like a craving I couldn't ignore. We set rules. Never leave our spouses. Keep this our little secret. Just two people finding some happiness in this crazy world. I know, it sounds cliche, but at that moment, it felt real, necessary even. So, we planned to meet. I was a bundle of nerves. What if he wasn't what I expected? What if I wasn't what he expected? I remember standing in front of my mirror, second-guessing my outfit, my hair, my everything. But when I finally saw him, it was like all those doubts just melted away. He was everything he seemed online and more. We met at this quiet little coffee shop downtown, the kind where you can sit in a corner and nobody pays you any mind. He walked in, and I swear, my heart skipped a beat. He had this easy smile, you know, the kind that makes you feel like you've known someone forever. And when we talked, it was like we'd been doing this for years. The conversation just flowed, no awkward pauses, no searching for what to say next. It was natural, comfortable, and thrilling all at once. As we sat there, sipping our coffees, I realized something. I wasn't just attracted to him physically, it was more than that. We connected on a level one hadn't experienced in years. He got my jokes, shared his dreams, and listened, really listened, to what I had to say. It's funny how you don't realize what you're missing until you find it again. But then reality hit me. I was a married woman, a mother, sitting across from another woman's husband, feeling things I hadn't felt in a long time. The guilt crept in, but so did the excitement. It was like being on a roller coaster, thrilling and terrifying all at once. We kept seeing each other after that first meeting. It was like we were in our little bubble when we were together. The world outside didn't matter. We'd meet whenever we could sneak away, always careful, always mindful of the lives we were leading outside of our secret rendezvous. Sexually, we were like two puzzle pieces that fit perfectly. It was passionate, intense, and liberating. I'd forgotten what it was like to be wanted in that way, to feel desire. He made me laugh, made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. But every time we said goodbye, a part of me felt sad, empty. It was like coming down from a high, knowing you can't stay in that euphoria forever. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I'd never been unfaithful before, never even thought about it. But here I was, in the middle of an affair, with someone who wasn't my husband. I'd tell myself it was just physical, just a fling. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was developing feelings for Mr. X, real, strong, scary feelings. So, there I was, caught in this whirlwind of emotion, trying to juggle my secret life with my real life. Every time I looked at my husband, I felt this pang of guilt. He hadn't changed. He was still the man I married. But I had changed. I was doing something I never thought I would, and it was tearing me up inside. But I couldn't stop. I was addicted to the way Mr. X made me feel, to the escape he provided from my everyday life. It was like I was living in two worlds, and I couldn't let go of either. So, there I was, deep in something I never saw coming. Funny how life throws you these curveballs, huh? One minute you're this married, responsible adult, and the next, you're sneaking around like a teenager. The thing with Mr. X wasn't just a one-off thing, it became our little escape from reality. Every chance we got, we'd meet. Sometimes it was just for coffee, other times, well, you know. It was like we were in our own little world when we were together. The conversation, the laughter, the sex, it was all so intense, so real. But with every meeting, the stakes got higher. We were playing with fire, and we both knew it. We had our rules. Never leave our spouses, keep it secret, but rules don't stop feelings, do they? And boy, were there feelings. I'd find myself waiting for his texts, getting butterflies when his name popped up on my phone. And when we couldn't meet, I felt this ache, like something was missing. It's crazy how someone can become such a big part of your life so quickly. And then there was my husband. He was still there, still working hard, still the good guy the first married. But it was like I was living a double life. With him, I played the part of the loving wife, the caring mother. But when I was with Mr. X, I was someone else, someone more alive, more vibrant. I know it sounds awful, but it's the truth. The guilt was there, always lurking in the background. I'd look at my husband and kids and feel this pang in my heart. What was I doing? Why was I risking everything for this affair? But then I'd see Mr. X, and all those doubts would just vanish. It's like I was addicted to the way he made me feel, and I couldn't give that up. One night, we got close to getting caught. My husband almost read a text from Mr. X. My heart stopped, I swear. I managed to brush it off, make up some excuse, but it was a wake-up call. We had to be more careful. We couldn't let this thing we had ruin our lives. But careful or not, things were getting complicated. It wasn't just physical anymore. We were sharing parts of ourselves, our hopes, our fears. I found out Mr. X wasn't just some guy looking for a fling. He had his own set of problems, his own unhappy marriage. We were two lost souls finding comfort in each other. One day, he told me he was falling for me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Falling for me? What did that even mean in our situation? We were both married, both had lives and families. There was no future for us, no happy ending. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was real life, and in real life, things get messy. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was terrified. This was getting too deep, too serious. But another part of me was thrilled. It meant something, didn't it, to have someone care about you that much? I started to look at my husband differently. We'd been together so long, it was like I stopped seeing him. But now, I started to really notice him. The way he'd play with the kids, the way he'd look at me across the dinner table. I realized I still cared about him, maybe even loved him. But it was different from what I felt for Mr. X. It was more comfortable, more familiar, less exciting. The affair continued, but the thrill was starting to fade, replaced by this constant fear of getting caught, this nagging guilt that wouldn't go away. Every time I lied to my husband, Every time I snuck out to meet Mr. X, it weighed on me. I was stuck between two worlds, and it was exhausting. One evening, Mr. X and I had a talk. We knew this couldn't go on forever. We were risking too much, hurting too many people. But the thought of ending it, of never seeing him again, was unbearable. So, we made a decision. We'd continue seeing each other, but we'd be more careful, more mindful of the risks. We promised it would just be about us, about the connection we had. No future plans, no false hopes. Just two people finding some happiness in a messed up situation. But promises are easy to make and hard to keep. As the affair went on, the lines started to blur. What started as an escape from loneliness had turned into something complex, something dangerous. I was in deeper than I ever intended, and I didn't know how to get out. If you think affairs are all secret texts and steamy meetups, think again. It's like you're constantly on a tightrope, balancing what you want with what you're supposed to be. And let me tell you, it's exhausting. Mr. X and I, we were in deep. Every stolen moment we had was electric, but it was the moments in between that were killing me. You see, when you're juggling a secret like this, every little thing feels like a potential disaster. Take my husband, for example. He started noticing little changes. Why wouldn't he? I was distracted, on edge. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I could see the questions in his eyes, but he never asked. Not outright, anyway. Maybe he didn't want to know the answers. Maybe I was good at making excuses. Either way, it was this unspoken thing between us, a cloud hanging over our marriage. With Mr. X, it was different. We were in our bubble, a world where we didn't have to worry about responsibilities or consequences. But even that wasn't simple. The more time we spent together, the more I realized this wasn't just a fling. I was catching feelings, and that was dangerous. You don't dive into an affair expecting to fall for the other person. But there I was, falling and hard. One night, it hit me. We were lying there, in some cheap hotel room, and he was talking about his life, his wife. And I thought, what are we doing? We're not just messing up our lives. We're messing up theirs too. It was like a slap in the face, a wake-up call. What, did I end it there? No. I was too far gone. It wasn't just about the sex anymore. We'd talk for hours, about everything and nothing. He understood me in a way no one else did. And I think I did the same for him. It was like we were two pieces of the same puzzle, fitting together just right. But with every secret rendezvous, every lie I told, the guilt was building up. It was like this heavy weight I was carrying around all the time. I'd look at my kids, their innocent faces, and feel like the worst person in the world. They deserved a mother who was present, not one who was sneaking around, living a lie. And then there was this one day, this one moment that changed everything. I was at the grocery store, just doing my usual shopping, and I ran into someone I knew. She was asking about my family, how things were going, the usual small talk. But then she said something about how lucky I was, how my husband and I seemed to have the perfect marriage. It was like a punch to the gut, if only she knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything. My husband, my kids, Mr. X. What was I doing to all of us? This wasn't a game, it was our lives. And I was messing it all up. I started to pull away from Mr. X, but it wasn't easy. He could sense something was wrong, and we had this big, emotional confrontation. It was messy, full of tears and things we couldn't take back. He asked me what I wanted, and the truth was, I didn't know. I wanted him, but I also wanted my family. I wanted everything to be okay, but I knew it couldn't be. Not like this. Things with my husband were strained, too. It was like we were living together, but we weren't really together. We were like roommates, co-parenting and sharing a house, but not much else. The connection we used to have was gone, buried under layers of lies and secrets. So, there I was, stuck between two men, two lives. With Mr. X, I felt alive, desired, understood. But with my husband, there was history, a family, a life we'd built together. It was like I was at a crossroads, and I had no idea which way to go. The affair was at its height, but so was the turmoil. I was being torn in different directions, and I knew I couldn't keep it up. Something had to give, I had to make a choice, but the thought of choosing was terrifying. That's the thing about affairs. They start as this exciting escape from reality, but they quickly turn into a trap, one where every choice seems impossible, every step feels like a mistake. And I was right in the middle of it, trying to figure out how to fix the mess I'd made. Life's funny, you know. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws a curveball that knocks you off your feet. And let me tell you, I was about to face one hell of a curveball. The affair with Mr. X was like a house of cards, fragile and ready to collapse at any moment. And collapse it did, in a way I never saw coming. It all started with this unexpected twist, something that changed everything. I was at work, just a regular day, you know? Then I get this call from Mr. X. He sounded off, like something was really wrong. Turns out, his wife had found out. Not about me, specifically, but she knew he was up to something. The way he talked, all panicked and desperate, it was like a bucket of cold water over my head. This wasn't a game, we were playing with people's lives, real lives. I remember hanging up and just sitting there, feeling like the worst person in the world. How did I get here? How did I become this person who lies, cheats, and hurts the people she loves? It was like I was waking up from a dream, a really bad one. Then came the confrontation with my lover. We met up, and it was tense, full of anger and accusations. He was scared, I was scared, and for the first time, we were truly honest with each other. We talked about ending it, about how we couldn't keep doing this to our families. But even as we said it, I could feel the pull, the connection that wasn't just going to disappear. Around the same time, something was happening in my marriage. My husband, who'd been distant and busy for so long, started changing. It was like he sensed he was losing me. He began making an effort, coming home earlier, trying to reconnect. It was sweet, in a way, but also heartbreaking. Where was this man when I needed him most? One evening, he sat me down and asked me point blank if I was happy. It wasn't an accusation, more like a genuine, concerned question. I didn't know what to say. The truth, the lie? I ended up saying something vague, but it hung in the air between us, this big, unsaid truth. I was at a crossroads. On one side, there was Mr. X, passion, excitement, something that felt like love. On the other, my husband, stability, history, my family. I knew I had to choose, but how do you choose when each option feels like losing something vital? The decision to end the affair wasn't easy. It came after a lot of tears, a lot of soul searching. I met Mr. X for what we both knew would be the last time. It was emotional, saying goodbye to someone who'd become such a big part of my life. We didn't end it with anger or accusations, just a sad acceptance that this was the right thing to do. Walking away from that hotel room was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind, but I also knew it was time to face the music, to try and fix the life I'd nearly destroyed. Coming clean to my husband was the next step. I didn't tell him everything, just that I'd been unhappy, that I felt we'd drifted apart. It was a half-truth, but it was all I could give him. To my surprise, he listened. He really listened, and for the first time in a long time we talked. Really talked. We decided to give our marriage another shot. It wasn't going to be easy, fixing something that had been broken for so long. But we both wanted to try, for us, for our kids. So, that's chapter 4. The affair ends, my marriage hangs by a thread, and I'm left trying to piece together the remnants of my life. It's not a happy ending, not yet. But it's a start, a chance to make things right. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. You ever have one of those moments where everything just feels broken? That was me, after ending things with Mr. X. It's like I was walking around in a daze, trying to figure out what comes next. Ending the affair was hard, but what came after was even harder. There I was, back in my real life, but it didn't feel real anymore. Everything was off, like I was living in someone else's story. My husband and I, we were trying, really trying. He was being so damn understanding, which almost made it worse. I kept waiting for him to yell, to blame me, to do something. But he just didn't. We went to couples therapy, started having date nights again, the whole deal. It was awkward, like we were two strangers learning to be together again. And then there were the nights. The long, lonely nights where I'd lie awake, missing Mr. X. I'd think about calling him, just to hear his voice, but I never did. I'd made my choice, and I had to stick to it. But man, it hurt. It hurt like hell. During the day, I was mom, the wife, the woman who had her life together. But inside, I was a mess. I felt like I'd lost a part of myself, a part one wasn't sure I could get back. My kids, bless them, they were my saving grace. They didn't know anything, of course. To them, mom was just mom. But they kept me grounded, kept me focused on the here and now. As for my husband, we were slowly getting back to something that resembled normal. It wasn't the same as before, couldn't be. Too much had changed, but we were talking, really talking, and that was something. One day, I ran into an old friend, someone I hadn't seen since before the affair. She commented on how happy I looked, how everything seemed to be going great for me. I just nodded and smiled, but inside, I was screaming. If only she knew. Reflecting on everything, I realized I'd been searching for something in Mr. X that I should have been searching for in myself. I wanted excitement, passion, something to break the monotony of my life. But I was looking in the wrong places. Ending the affair didn't magically fix everything. If anything, it opened up a whole new set of problems. But it also opened my eyes. I started seeing a therapist, just for me this time. It was hard, facing up to what I'd done, the choices I'd made. But it was necessary. Through therapy, I began to understand why I'd had the affair in the first place. It wasn't just about feeling lonely or neglected. It was about me, about how I saw myself, how I'd lost myself in the role of wife and mother. I started doing things just for me. I took up painting, something I'd always wanted to try. I started reading again, losing myself in stories that had nothing to do with my life. It was like I was finding pieces of myself I didn't even know were missing. My husband noticed the changes. He'd comment on my paintings, encourage me to take time for myself. It was weird, this new dynamic between us. But it was good, too. It felt like we were building something new, something stronger. As for Mr. X, I thought about him less and less as time went on. He'd always be a part of my story, a chapter I'd never forget. But that's all it was, a chapter, not the whole book. So, that's chapter 5. It's about ending, but it's also about beginning. Beginning to heal, to understand, to rebuild. It's not an easy chapter, but it's an important one. Because sometimes you have to break everything down to start building it back up again. Life after an affair is like walking on a tightrope without a safety net. Every step is uncertain, every breath is a reminder of the fall you just took. But you keep walking because what else can you do? My husband and I, we were finding our way back to each other, but it was like learning to dance to a completely new tune. Sometimes we stepped on each other's toes, sometimes we moved in perfect harmony. But we were dancing again, and that mattered. There were moments, fleeting moments, when I saw glimpses of the man I fell in love with. And in those moments, I remembered why I chose to stay, why I chose to fight for our marriage. It wasn't just about the kids or the years we'd spent together. It was about us, about the life we'd built and the future we still could have. But the shadows of the affair lingered. There were times when I caught a certain look in my husband's eyes, a look that said he remembered, that he hadn't forgotten. And in those moments, I felt the weight of my choices, the impact of my actions. I had to learn to forgive myself, which was perhaps the hardest part of all. I'd made a mistake, a big one. But I was more than that mistake. I was a wife, a mother, a woman who'd lost her way but was finding it back. Slowly, the pieces of my life started falling back into place. Not the same picture as before, but maybe a better one. A picture with more honesty, more understanding, more of me in it. I won't say I don't think about Mr. X anymore. Sometimes, when I'm alone, my mind wanders back to him, to us. But it's not with longing or regret, it's more like remembering a dream that was beautiful and painful in equal measure. So here I am, at the end of this chapter, standing on firmer ground than before. My marriage isn't perfect, but it's real. My life isn't exciting, but it's mine. And me? I'm still learning, still growing, still healing. But I'm getting there, one step at a time. And that's the thing about life. It doesn't give you neat endings or simple solutions. It gives you messes, challenges, and the chance to find something beautiful in the chaos. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Finding beauty, finding peace.